The devil's spawn surround us. This world is a strange one. Satan and his little minions enjoy tricking us every chance they get. If that means lying to us, making us believe that we are contacting a dead relative, they'll do it. So long as that means they can get closer and closer to us before the absolute worst happens. So tonight, I'll share with you 5 allegedly real demon encounters. But first, I want to give a shout out to the highest scoring night watchers on our website. They are Anna Marie in first, Orion in second, Young Gamer in third, Sano in fourth, and Bronson in fifth. Go to darknessprevails.org to start earning points, and I'll be adding a temporary bonus to sharing and commenting for extra points. And while you're there, check out the new This World is a Strange One t-shirt at our store. That's darknessprevails.org. Now, I will be gone for the next few days with family for the holidays, but I'll be back. So until then, happy holidays to you all and stay safe no matter where you are. Anyway, let's face your worst nightmares. Number 1. Demons in the Dark. Submitted by Evelyn. This happened around 3 years ago. I went to sleep over at my cousin's house for a weekend, and my Aunt Ginny was all into this paranormal crap, like Ouija boards and all that kind of stuff. My cousins and I believed that if she played with the Ouija board, then demons and spirits would enter her house. Olivia, Harper, and me all shared a room that night. We stole my aunt's iPad and watched horror movies because we liked to get scared. Eventually, it was too much for us, so we decided to turn it off. My 2 cousins fell asleep soon after that, but I couldn't. It took me a while just to feel tired. Eventually, I was about to nod off, and I started to hear voices. But everyone in the house was sleeping. No one was awake. Olivia and Harper had a 2-year-old little brother and parents, that was all. So I woke up my 2 cousins, and I told them, I hear voices, and I don't recognize them. Olivia looked at me. We got up and walked out of the room to Jack's room, her little brother. As soon as we walked in, the lights turned on, and then shortly after, they began to flicker on and off as if someone was playing with the light switch. Then those weird voices came again, and let me say, now that I could hear it a little bit better, they sounded like they were speaking in a different language, and for some reason, they just wouldn't leave. Right before we picked up Jack out of his crib, a shadowy figure around 7 feet tall appeared over it. We all jumped back. It seemed to be blurry. We couldn't make out its details very well, but it looked to be crying blood or something red. We were all frozen in place. This thing seemed to be looking down at Jack, but then it slowly turned toward us. Then, in a very slow, steady motion that seemed to take ages, it raised up what appeared to be hands with scraggly fingernails at the tips, and it waved at us. And at that moment, I felt fear and anxiety stronger than I've ever felt before, than I think I'll ever feel again. Its hands didn't even look like hands. They were so monstrous. I picked up Jack quickly, and we ran out of the room and back into Olivia's. We stayed there all night, watching the door, unable to sleep. The next morning, we told my cousin's parents. I remember their horrified faces. Now, in the typical stories, you'd expect the people to say that it was just a nightmare, that we're just kids with creative imaginations or something like that. Not this time, because they told us that they thought their daughter had walked into their room and crawled into bed with them. But eventually, she got out of bed, and the figure was no longer their daughter, but a tall black shape. This demonic figure walked out of their room. Later that year, they moved out, and I like to believe it's probably because there were demons in that house. To this day, what scares me the most is that my aunt was the one that brought that figure into their home. She practically summoned this demon as it began to haunt her family not long after playing with that stupid Ouija board. And now the image of that thing waving at us, it follows me in my dreams, and every time I close my eyes, that demon is there waving at me. Number 2. The Devil's Stare. Submitted by Zmeister. Years ago, my mother and I used to go to the southern part of Texas known as the Valley. My mom's side of the family lived there and also in Corpus Christi. It was a great getaway since our whole house was always full. With 4 sisters and my mother and only 2 rooms, it was a fiasco. One weekend, my mom said for us to pack a few articles of clothing because we were going to go to Harlingen, where my grandmother lived, and we'd be staying with my aunt in a nearby town about 20 minutes away from my grandma's. I always had a good time there because the cousin that lived with my aunt was my age and we got along very well, so I knew it was going to be fun. We arrived in Harlingen and visited my grandmother all day. Then finally my mom said, "Let's go. Your aunt and I are going to go out later, so I need to start getting ready." We drove to my aunt's house. Now, her house was once a housing unit for soldiers way back when, and the home was huge. I stayed with my cousin in his room, and we played video games well into the night. My mom and aunt finally left at around 10 p.m., and they said they'd be gone for a while. So, of course, my cousin and I kept playing video games. Later on that night, my cousin asked me, "When you got here, did you get a weird feeling? Did you feel anything?" I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't feel a thing at all. Puzzled, I asked why. He told me, "Well, I've seen things here, and I saw the devil himself." The moment he said that, I had a creepy feeling in my stomach because he had the look of fear in his eyes I've never seen. I couldn't disbelieve him. I tried really hard to let that feeling go, and it got more intense later in the night. Eventually, I fell asleep on the floor by my cousin's bed. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I looked up toward him, only to see him sitting up in bed, staring into the doorway. The hallway was dimly lit from the porch light, and we were at the other end of the house. I asked my cousin what was wrong, and he said, "Hush, I hear something. I think it's happening again." After he said that, I turned to look towards the hallway myself, and what I saw changed my life forever. It is forever embedded into my memory. We heard footsteps with the noise of spurs on boots, and then a tall black shadow that looked like a man in a trench coat with a black cowboy hat came into the doorway and began walking towards the back door. I gasped quietly, and as soon as I did, the figure stopped. He stood motionless for a moment, and then he slowly turned, looking to where my cousin and I were. The smell of sulfur filled the room, and after what seemed like an eternity, the figure turned again and walked towards the back door. We did not hear the door slam, so we waited an hour or so until we got the courage to get up and look. We turned on all the lights in the room and walked to the door. The hallway was freezing cold, and we saw nothing. The smell of sulfur was still there though, and the door had a charcoal handprint on it. We even tried to wipe the handprint off, but it stayed there no matter what we did. When my mom and aunt came back, we told them everything that had happened, and they were scared. My aunt prayed over the house. She sprayed holy water through the whole thing. After that, my aunt moved out, and my cousin and I still talk about it every once in a while. Since then, though, I have never felt fear as palpable and powerful as I did that night. Number 3. Someone Else's Demon. Submitted by Caitlin. This happened a few years ago, and I've told only family members and a priest about all that happened. My friend, let's call her Ash, had always told me there was something in her house, and yes, I had a feeling of something being there. Now, my sister says it seems that some of our mother's side of the family have a sense of things like this. At first, Ash told me there was a ghost in our house, and it wasn't anything bad. And honestly, from our experiences, it seemed to only play with people if they had long hair. Once I fell asleep and woke up with my hair braided. One summer, Ash was dating this guy who was a complete jerk. I hated the guy. One day, Ash starts telling me there was something new in her house. Well, it was new to me. She told me this thing always came when she started to date somebody. I didn't think much of it, but then she explained how things were starting to get bad. One day she woke up in the middle of the night, feeling something in her bed. She woke up and her sheets were ripped. Not ripped like there was a hole torn in it, but more like something had clawed through them. She began to wake up with claw marks and bruises on her body. She started to have me over more often, especially when her mom, stepdad, or sister were gone. And let me just say, things were getting scary. One night, we were in the pool, and I felt as though we were being watched. I looked up on her roof, and I swear to God, I saw something moving. It looked like someone was on their hands and knees, crawling around on the roof. At first I thought it was the neighbor kid, playing a joke on us. But I saw red eyes, and I could hear the claws clacking on the roof. I stared at this thing for a minute, and it stared back at me. I'm not a church-going person, but at the time my mom was battling lung cancer and wanted to go back to church. Quickly I started to say a prayer, and the thing closed its eyes and literally disappeared. After that experience, I told Ash again and again to get someone to bless her house. She didn't listen, and it only got worse. One day we had another friend named Ty come over to help. He was a Wiccan, and I had hoped that he would back me up, telling Ash to get the house blessed. We go back to Ash, and Ty wanted to make a ring of protection and try to figure out what the thing wanted. At first, I didn't think anything would happen, and almost wanted to leave, but then something did. Ty's eyes became black, and he grabbed Ash, growling and yelling at her.
"You know what I want. You know what you did."
He said it in a voice so deep, it could not have been Ty. Being from a Catholic background, my instincts kicked in, and again I said a prayer. I put my hands on Ty, who tried to attack me for a moment, but then he stopped, and soon he came back to himself, asking what had happened. We told him, and I could see his face turn pale. We had to break the ring for someone to turn the lights on. You can probably guess who it had to be. Yep, it was me. I ran across the room as fast as I could and flipped the lights on. The moment I had stepped out of the ring, I could hear flies in my ear, like thousands of them were buzzing around me, and it only stopped the moment the lights switched on. We sat there in silence, taking deep breaths, trying to relax, when Ty said he had to go to the bathroom. The only one in the house was downstairs. I sat there with Ash to keep her calm since she was in tears. Then my phone began to ring, and it was Ty. Confused, I tried to answer, but I couldn't hear anything on the other end, so I was assuming he butt-dialed me and hung up. But again he called back. On the other line, there was no breathing, no sound of movement whatsoever. After a while, Ty came back. Ty is a chubby guy, and he was moving rather quickly. You could tell he was scared. He came in asking why I didn't answer my phone. I told him that I did, and I didn't hear anything on the other end. So I asked him what was going on. He said he had gone downstairs and he was walking to the bathroom. You have to go through the living room to get to the bathroom, and he was walking through the living room when he heard someone call his name. Of course, he turned toward the noise, and what he saw in front of him chilled him to the bone. When he turned, he saw something 6 feet tall, something human shape with red eyes, watching him. Immediately, he ran to the bathroom and locked the door and called me. After a moment, he began to walk out of the bathroom, but he could still see those eyes, so he stepped back in and made another call to me. When he didn't get an answer, he made a run for the bedroom we were in. After that, Ty was done. He left and I stayed with Ash that night. I had told my parents what was going on, what was happening to Ash, and how she was scared to stay alone. About a week later, Ash was on a trip to Florida, and it was a nice summer night, so I had my windows opened. I was about to go to bed and only had my eyes closed for about 10 minutes before I heard something. I looked, and standing next to my bed was a little boy. All in a flash, the boy jumped into my bed, grabbed me by my wrists, pinning me down, and he told me,
"I'm not scared of you."
I struggled violently for a moment. One moment my eyes were closed, and the next they were open, and in that time, he was gone. All that was left was a bruise the size and shape of a tiny hand. First thing I did was call Ash. I told her what happened, and she was very quiet. She stayed quiet for a moment before saying that she had Ty come back and that he had brought a spirit board. They both knew there was no way in hell that I would ever mess with something like that, and if I had a chance, I would toss that thing out of the window. The demon, as I started to call it, asked them,
"Where's your little friend?"
So of course they asked who it was talking about. My name is Caitlin, and I do go by Katie, and I wasn't surprised. that Ash told me that that's what the thing replied. Soon after that, Ash was over at my house and I was giving her hell for being on the Ouija board, and she was blowing me off, saying it was nothing. Then she told me that this demon told her its name, and I immediately recognized it. She kept saying it and saying it. Now, unless you're someone trained in dealing with this kind of thing, saying the name of a demon can give it power. I kicked her out of my house, and I had my parents call the priest to bless our home. About a year later, I was hanging out with Ash and another friend named Emily. It had been a long time since I had spent the night with Ash, since I got sick of her boyfriend and his short jokes. Ash was telling me that her mom had saged the house not too long ago, and that the demon was finally gone. When I walked into that house, I noticed that it did feel somewhat different. Not like the thing was gone, but different. I just thought I was on edge because of everything that had happened in the past. After a night of driving around going to places that were said to be haunted, we got back to Ash's and turned in for the night. Ash and her boyfriend were in one bed, and Emily and I were in another, in the same room. After sleeping a few hours, I woke up. I noticed that I was in a different spot in the bed than when I had gone down to sleep. Emily and I had seemed to switch places, and I was very sore and I felt just completely drained. A couple of days later, Ash called me and asked if I remember anything from after I fell asleep. I said no and asked why. She told me that her boyfriend had woke up around 5 in the morning and that he saw me standing in front of the cubbyhole that housed her Ouija board, that I just stood there in the dark, silent. After that, we had a falling out, and I just did not have the time for her or her Ouija board crap. My mom was dying and my sister was getting married. Another year had gone by and it was about a week before my mom died. And my mom kept telling me to get the boy away from her, to get the boy away. While my dad just thought it was her dying and seeing things, it made me wonder. Honestly, my mom was not a great person. And I wondered, could it have been the demon that's been haunting me? Number 4. Choked Out. Submitted by Jeterix. When I was younger, around 18 or 20, I lived for a while at my paternal grandmother's house. During this time, I was with a girl who became pregnant with my son. This story is about something that happened to us when she was over one day. It may have ended in tragedy for everyone if I was just seconds late. My grandma's old place, she now lives in a very nice condo a few blocks over, never gave me the creeps. I had never heard stories about anything unnatural happening there. And even with my other experiences, I had never encountered a negative presence in the house. And I had been over a lot when I was growing up, when my parents were working or away on business. I should mention that my parents had been separated since I was young. When I stayed at my grandma's in adulthood, I got my old room in the basement. Dark and unfinished, but still comfortable. On this day, my pregnant girlfriend, not my ex, was over relaxing, talking about baby stuff, usual dating things. She got thirsty, so she asked me to get her a glass of water from the main floor kitchen. So I jumped up and headed upstairs, getting slightly sidetracked by my uncle who had come by, but only for a few seconds. After a brief conversation with him, I grabbed her a glass of water from the tap and I came back downstairs, pushing open the sheets to my room, our makeshift door. What I found was my girlfriend on her back. Her eyes were bulging and bloodshot, and her face was beginning to turn blue. It looked like she was being pinned down. She wasn't able to move. I swiftly ran over, unsure about what was happening. I tried talking to her, but got no response. I tried handing her the cup, but she still did not move. I grabbed her shoulder, seemingly knocking her out of it, and she suddenly gasped for air, like she had been running for miles. She was shaking and muttering and crying. I helped her up into a sitting position, slowly giving her sips of the water I had gotten. She explained to me that as I went upstairs, she was suddenly grabbed, forced into the bed, and felt 2 strong hands gripping around her throat. They were squeezing tighter and tighter by the second, while something kept her from being able to fight back. The room felt suddenly darker, like something was angry and watching. Something was indignant that it didn't finish the job, that I had interfered, however accidental that help was. My sanctuary, my home, it now felt like I was very much unwelcome and as if this thing hated me being there. I got mad. I was upset, not only at this thing for making my safe place unwelcome, but obviously at it for risking my girlfriend's life and the life of my unborn child. I come from an Irish Catholic family, so I began to pray. I began to use whatever will I could muster to tell this thing to bluntly go away. It didn't completely work. Sure, it felt like it moved further away, maybe backed off, but it was just like it was pacing outside whatever border my will and prayers created. It felt like it knew I couldn't hold it back forever with just my will. My room was now its hunting ground as far as it was concerned, and instead of 2, it now had 3 targets that it wasn't willing to let go whatever tiny barriers I could come up with. But I did have an idea. I quickly rushed her as safely as I could over to the other side of the basement. I wanted her to be closer to what I thought would help. It was the small shrine of crosses and crucifixes dedicated to my late grandfather. This thing seemed to realize what I was doing, and it felt madder and darker, and I started pressing closer as we moved into the room with this beautiful shrine dedicated to the great man. It was fast, but thankfully we were faster. We got to the now brightly lit area of candles and religious symbols. It stopped dead outside whatever barrier this caused. I believe we had beaten it. I got her situated and began to ask God and my grandfather to protect us, to get this thing to leave. It was not welcome in this house. I prayed and begged hard, for the sake of myself, my girlfriend, my son, and my family that lived in the house. Finally, with some kind of feeling that resembled an angry growl, the feeling of darkness in the house disappeared. From that day on, though, I kept a cross in my room and around my neck. And number 5, Demon Sighting, submitted by Dimitri. I've always loved to explore abandoned houses and buildings. Every trip I would find the usual stuff: broken furniture, shattered glass, and lots of junk. On a few occasions, though, I would see a homeless man or a group of teens smoking or drinking. On this particular day, me and my girlfriend, who we'll call Vicky, set off to explore this abandoned building we had seen close to our house. The building appeared to be an old hospital or nursing home, based on the number of wheelchairs and medical gear thrown around the place. When we first entered, the only thing that seemed off was that there was a very odd smell. Not bad, just odd. Almost like burning hair and rotten meat. We ignored it, thinking it was a dead animal or old rotten wood. As we continued, we seemed to be going deeper into the building, getting closer to this odd smell. After about a half hour of walking through, we came to room 135. The door was demolished. There were chunks blown off of it, large gashes and weird stains all over it. But somehow it still managed to sit on its old rusted door hinges. I pushed it open with my foot, and honestly I expected a crap-filled empty room like the rest. But no. Instead, we found a room filled with random animal carcasses. Birds, rabbits, things like that. Each with varying amounts of decay, some bones, some fresh. It was the fact that some were fresh that really disturbed me. Wanting to impress my girlfriend, despite the creepiness and grossness of it all, I raised my shoulders and I walked ahead of her. Everything seemed to be fine, I guess. I turned to my left at one point, and when I did, I saw something extremely terrifying. There was a large black and red figure crouching down, and it was clawing at a piece of wood. It seemed to be blurred for some reason, as if the image of this thing was glitching somehow. It had a large black torso with strange shades of red all over. The legs and feet seemed to be too long for the body. I couldn't make out much, but I could tell that its neck was extremely thin, and it seemed its head ended in a snout, and from that snout something dark dripped. I must have stared at this thing for a full minute, before finally something even worse happened. It spoke to me.
Nice night, boy.
It sounded like 20 different voices speaking at once, but with a deep and guttural undertone. Immediately, I ran towards the door, grabbing my girlfriend by the hand. We ran together, but I don't think the thing followed us. When we got back to the car, we drove for about 5 minutes before I stopped. I got out, walked to the side of the road, and puked up my guts. My girlfriend asked me what I saw. Apparently, she didn't see it. She didn't enter the room after all, and that means she did not see the demon thing. but she did hear the voice. I lied and I said that it was just some homeless guy. Because what would I tell this girl? That I saw a demon? No, I wouldn't say that. I would sound crazy. But to this day, it haunts me. That voice, it still comes to me in my mind. And I still wonder, why was it so calm? And why did it not chase us? To this day, my girlfriend thinks that I threw up from all of the dead animals in the room. If you think the families that lived in the Amityville house had it bad, just look at these encounters. People who lived their normal everyday lives for the most part. Then something murderous, something sinister found them, and it made their lives a living hell. It really makes you wonder, when will it be your turn? Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to add Darkness Prevails to your favorites for true scary stories, creepypasta, and to submit your own stories. Thanks, and happy holidays.